"Where are your parents?" The officer pressed down on the boy with glasses, not knowing that this child held a U.S. patent. What happened next would shake everyone who witnessed it. The soft hum of air conditioning and the whisper of turning pages filled the quiet reading hall. Summer sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the Cambridge Public Library in Massachusetts, casting bright stripes across the floor. Among the adults, students, and researchers at one of the distant tables sat a boy who looked no older than 11. In a thin sweater, with round glasses and tousled hair, he was absorbed in his notes and laptop, where a molecular protein model flickered on the screen. His name was Michael Brooks. He had traveled from Atlanta for a 2-day scientific conference on synthetic biology. His work on programmable protein self-assembly had already caught the attention of teams from Harvard and MIT research laboratories. Moreover, 2 months ago, he had received his first U.S. patent, officially registered under the name of an 11-year-old boy. But Mrs. Pearson didn't know this. A library visitor and mother of 3, she sat at the neighboring table. Her gaze swept across the hall, lingered on Michael. And something, his concentration, his solitude, his skin color, made her uneasy. She approached the registration desk and whispered, "I'm not sure that boy is with anyone. He's alone and he's doing something with a computer. Maybe we should check." 15 minutes later, Officer Lawrence entered the hall, a tall man with thick mustaches and a habit of keeping his hand on his radio. He stopped beside Michael's table and loudly declared, "Son, show me some ID. Where are your parents?" Michael looked up. He didn't appear frightened, more puzzled. "Excuse me, but I'm 11. I don't have a driver's license. I'm here by invitation from Harvard Biolab." He tried to hand over his registration badge and a letter printed on official letterhead. Lawrence didn't look. "Don't play games with me," the officer said. "Who let you in here? You can't be here without supervision." By this point, every head in the hall had turned toward them. A man in a suit stood up from his chair. It was Dr. Leon Zhang, a bioengineer from Harvard. "Excuse me, officer," he intervened, approaching them. "This is Michael Brooks. He's our invited guest. I personally supervised his application. He's a genius, and tomorrow he's presenting a lecture to researchers from 6 universities." "What?" Lawrence was stunned. "This boy?" "Yes, Dr. Shi," Zhang replied. "He's the first child in the country to receive a patent for synthetic protein design. He found a way for cellular membranes to self-assemble at room temperature." "And you're saying he works with MIT?" MIT works with him." The situation quickly became public. One of the students filmed the moment on his phone, a video where a boy was asked to show his parents, despite his badge, papers, and absolute confidence. Online headlines tore through news feeds. 11-year-old inventor with patent stopped at library because he seemed out of place, and Harvard genius detained by police for working in reading room. The next day, Michael took the stage at the Young Researchers Conference in Harvard's Lowell Hall. The applause didn't stop for 3 minutes. He gripped the microphone firmly, as if he knew this moment was important not just for him. "People often don't believe me when I tell them who I am. They look for adults nearby, as if I can't be here myself. But science doesn't require age, only curiosity and persistence." Silence fell over the hall. Then, an ovation. Later in an interview, he said, "I'm not angry. I just hope that next time someone sees a child with a laptop, maybe they'll first ask, 'What are you working on?' instead of, 'Where are your parents?'" The incident at Cambridge Public Library became a watershed moment that rippled far beyond the confines of academic circles. Within hours of the video going viral, "Where are your parents?" began trending on social media platforms worldwide. The hashtag became a rallying cry against age discrimination and racial profiling. But it also sparked a deeper conversation about how society perceives young minds engaged in serious intellectual work. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a child psychologist at Boston Children's Hospital, was among the first experts to weigh in. "What we witnessed wasn't just profiling based on age or race," she explained to CNN that evening. "It was a fundamental failure to recognize that genius doesn't come with an expiration date or a particular appearance. Michael Brooks represents thousands of gifted children who are dismissed daily simply because they don't fit our preconceived notions." The Cambridge Police Department initially defended Officer Lawrence's actions, stating in a press release that he was following standard protocol for unaccompanied minors in public spaces. However, as more details emerged about Michael's credentials and the circumstances of his visit, the department's position became increasingly untenable. Harvard University, meanwhile, rallied around their young collaborator. President Alan Garber issued a statement calling the incident a profound reminder of the biases that persist in our society, and announced that the university would be launching a new initiative to support young researchers from underrepresented communities. But perhaps the most significant response came from an unexpected source: the other children who had been quietly pursuing their own advanced studies. Inspired by Michael's visibility, dozens of young prodigies began sharing their stories online. There was Elena Rodriguez, a 12-year-old from Phoenix who had developed a new water purification method using solar energy. There was David Kim, a 10-year-old from Detroit who had created an app that helped elderly patients remember their medications. And there was Aisha Johnson, a 13-year-old from Birmingham who had discovered a more efficient way to extract rare earth elements from electronic waste. These children, who had been working in relative obscurity, suddenly found themselves part of a movement. The incident at the library had done more than vindicate one young scientist. It had illuminated an entire generation of brilliant minds that society had been overlooking. Michael's presentation the following day at Harvard was streamed live to over 200,000 viewers worldwide. His research on programmable protein self-assembly was groundbreaking in its own right, but the context gave his words additional weight. When he described how proteins could be engineered to form complex structures automatically, mimicking biological processes, the audience understood they were witnessing not just scientific innovation, but a metaphor for human potential. "Proteins don't ask permission to fold," Michael said, clicking through his slides with practiced ease. "They don't wait for approval or validation. They simply follow their nature and create something extraordinary. That's what all of us should do: follow our nature, pursue our curiosity, and create." The technical details of his work were impressive even to seasoned researchers. He had identified specific amino acid sequences that could trigger self-assembly under precise temperature and pH conditions. This breakthrough had potential applications in drug delivery, tissue engineering, and even environmental cleanup. The fact that such sophisticated work had emerged from an 11-year-old mind was, as one MIT professor later noted, both humbling and inspiring. Following the presentation, the questions from the audience revealed a shift in perspective. Rather than focusing on Michael's age, researchers engaged with his ideas on their merits. Dr. Jennifer Wu from Stanford asked about scalability. Professor Robert Chen from UCLA inquired about potential side effects. Dr. Maria Santos from Johns Hopkins wanted to know about collaboration opportunities. This was what Michael had been seeking all along: not special treatment because of his age, but equality despite it. The aftermath of the Cambridge incident extended well beyond academic circles. Mrs. Pearson, the library visitor who had initially raised concerns about Michael, issued a public apology through her lawyer. "I acted on unconscious bias," she admitted, "and I deeply regret that my assumptions led to an unnecessary and humiliating confrontation for a remarkable young person." Officer Lawrence faced a more complex reckoning. Internal Affairs launched an investigation into his handling of the situation, though he maintained that he had been following department protocols. "I was trying to ensure a child's safety," he told investigators. "I never intended to cause harm or embarrassment." However, body camera footage later revealed that he had ignored Michael's attempts to show his credentials and had dismissed Dr. Zhang's initial explanations. The Cambridge Police Department eventually implemented new training protocols focusing on implicit bias and appropriate responses to unusual situations. Chief Patricia Moore announced that officers would receive specific guidance on recognizing and respecting young people engaged in legitimate academic or professional activities. 3 months after the library incident, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology offered Michael something unprecedented: a collaborative research position that would allow him to work with graduate students and faculty while continuing his regular education. The arrangement, carefully structured to protect his childhood while nurturing his gifts, became a model for other institutions dealing with exceptionally gifted young people. But perhaps the most meaningful change occurred in Michael himself. The boy who had been quietly pursuing his passion in relative anonymity became an advocate for other young minds facing similar challenges. He established the Young Innovators Fund, which provided resources and mentorship for children pursuing advanced research projects. The fund's motto, borrowed from his Harvard presentation, was simple: "Curiosity has no age limit." A year later, Michael returned to the Cambridge Public Library, not for research this time, but for a special event. The library had established the Michael Brooks Reading Room, a space specifically designed for young researchers and innovators. The dedication ceremony was attended by hundreds of people, including many of the children whose stories had emerged in the wake of his experience. Standing at the podium where he had once been questioned about his right to exist in that space, Michael reflected on the journey. "This room represents more than just a place to study," he said. "It represents the idea that knowledge belongs to anyone curious enough to seek it, regardless of their age, background, or appearance." In the audience, Dr. Zhang watched with pride as his young colleague spoke with the confidence of someone who had not only survived prejudice, but had transformed it into progress. The protein researcher had become something more, a catalyst for change, a bridge between potential and recognition. Officer Lawrence was also present at the ceremony, having requested permission to attend. He approached Michael afterward, extending his hand. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "And more than that, I owe you thanks. You taught me something important about making assumptions." Michael shook his hand without hesitation. "We all make mistakes," he replied. "The important thing is what we learn from them." As the evening wound down and the crowd dispersed, Michael found himself alone in the reading room that now bore his name. He sat at the same table where he had been working that day, pulled out his laptop, and opened a new research project he had been developing, a study on social bias in STEM education. The boy who had once been asked where his parents were now spent his time ensuring that other young minds would never have to answer that question. His patent in synthetic biology had been just the beginning. His real innovation was in changing how society sees potential, not as something limited by age or appearance, but as something that can emerge anywhere, at any time, in anyone willing to pursue it. The soft hum of air conditioning filled the quiet reading hall, just as it had that day over a year ago. But now, other young researchers occupied nearby tables. A 9-year-old working on renewable energy solutions, a 12-year-old developing new mathematical algorithms, a 10-year-old studying marine biology. They worked without fear, knowing that their age was not a barrier to their legitimacy. Michael looked up from his laptop and smiled. Sometimes the most important discoveries happen not in laboratories, but in the moments when society finally recognizes what was there all along, the boundless potential of a curious mind, regardless of the body that houses it. The future, he realized, belonged not to those who fit expectations, but to those brave enough to exceed them. And in a reading room in Cambridge, Massachusetts, that future was being written one keystroke at a time.